If you were asked to guess who was happier, right? A parent who desperately wanted 4 kids but only had two, or a parent who wanted 2 kids but ended up with three, who would you choose?
I mean, I think most people would instinctively pick the one who got exactly what they wanted, or at least closer to it.
Right, but think about it for a second. We are constantly fed this idea that having an unfulfilled longing, wanting a big family but not getting it, is just the ultimate tragedy.
Yeah, that's definitely the cultural narrative we all grew up with.
But what if science just proved our common sense entirely wrong?
Well, it's a complete reversal of how we typically view family planning. We tend to focus so heavily on the heartbreak of, not having enough kids that we completely ignore the psychological weight of having too much.
Exactly. Welcome to a new deep dive. Today we're tackling a question that has sparked, frankly, endless, highly emotional debates. And that is, does having children actually make people happy?
It's a heavy topic for sure.
Yeah, it really is. And to get to the bottom of this, we are looking at a really illuminating article from Psychology Today by Dr. Sebastian Aucklenberg. He's breaking down a massive, brand new 2026 study published in the Journal of Personality.
And this is honestly a landmark piece of research. I mean, for decades, the scientific community had this massive, glaring blind spot when it came to measuring parental happiness.
Yeah.
And this new study, it finally addresses it head on.
Okay, let's unpack this. How did researchers get the measurement of something so fundamental, so wrong for so long? Like, what were they missing?
Well, historically, when psychologists tried to figure out if kids made people happy, they used these incredibly blunt instruments.
Right.
They would basically take a group of people, count the sheer number of children each person had, and then just measure their overall psychological well-being.
So it was purely a numbers game.
Exactly. They were looking at demographics.
Yeah.
They were treating every parent with 3 kids as if they were identical to every other parent with 3 kids.
So they were basically just doing a head count. Like, let's see who's smiling the most, the person with 0 kids, 1 kid, or 5 kids.
Yes. And by doing that, they neglected the single most crucial factor of the entire human experience.
Which is?
Our internal desires.
I never stopped to ask these parents, before the kids were even in the picture, what they actually wanted their lives to look like. It's a concept known in psychology as fertility desires.
That feels like a ridiculous oversight.
It really does, in hindsight.
I mean, it's like trying to measure the physical benefits of exercise, but completely ignoring whether the person, signed up for a marathon or is running away from a bear.
No, that's a good way to put it.
Right. In both scenarios, the person's heart rate is spiking, their muscles are working, they are sweating. The objective physical reality is identical.
Right, but the psychological experience is totally different.
Exactly. The person who chose to run is experiencing endorphins and accomplishment, but the person being chased is experiencing pure traumatic terror. Okay, well, that's a highly intense way to put it, but mechanically, yeah, it's a great analogy.
Thanks.
The physiological output might look similar, but the internal state really dictates the reality of the experience. The subjective desire to be in that situation changes how your brain processes the stress of it all.
And so for someone who has absolutely zero desire to be a parent, remaining child-free isn't a tragic miss. It's a successful execution of their life goals.
Precisely.
But for someone who desperately wants to be a parent, not being able to conceive is a devastating life event. How did a whole field of science just ignore the fact that people have different goals?
Mostly because counting kids is just easy demographic data, Whereas measuring complex, shifting internal desires, that's messy psychological data. It's super hard to track over time.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
But that's where Laura Buchinger and her research team at the University of Berlin stepped in to change the game. They decided to finally measure the mismatch between what people want and what they actually get.
And they didn't just ask a handful of college students in a lab, right?
Yeah. Oh, no, not at all. They utilized data from the German socioeconomic panel study. And this is crucial because it's not just a cross-sectional survey.
Right.
A standard survey is like taking a photograph. It just captures a single moment in time. But panel data is more like a movie. It tracks the exact same individuals over a long period.
Wow.
In this case, they looked at over 23,000 volunteers over the course of years.
23,000 people. That's a small city.
It is massive.
That scale alone gives these findings some serious gravity. If you're tracking that many people over time, you're watching their desires evolve, their families grow, and their happiness fluctuate in real time.
Exactly. It allows you to see cause and effect much more clearly. So the researchers combed through this data, focusing on two very simple but profound questions that the volunteers answered.
Okay, what were they?
First, they asked, how many children would you ideally have? And second, how many children do you actually have?
The dream versus the reality.
Yes. And based on the answers to those two questions, the researchers sorted those 23,000 people into 5 distinct groups.
Okay, let's hear them.
Group 1 is the child-free by choice. Their ideal was 0, and their actual was 0.
Makes total sense.
Group 2 is the involuntarily child-free. Their ideal was greater than 0, but their actual was 0.
Okay.
Group 3, these are the parents who hit the exact mark. They had the precise number of children they ideally wanted.
The perfect match group.
Right. Then we have Group 4, parents who had children but fewer than they had originally desired. Say they wanted 4, but, they stopped at 2.
Got it.
And finally, Group 5, parents who had children but more than they had initially desired. Maybe they wanted 1, but ended up with twins.
Okay, before we get to the big reveal of who is actually happy, I want to pause on something you mentioned in the notes. There is a massive gap in the overall averages across all these people, regardless of their group.
Yeah, there really is. Across all 23,000 volunteers, the average ideal number of children was 2.35.
Which totally tracks with the cultural messaging we all absorb. I mean, the classic image of a family usually features 2 or 3 kids. It's what you see in car commercials and on sitcoms.
It's the standard blueprint. But the average actual number of children across the board was only 1.56.
That is a staggering drop-off. I mean, almost a full child difference between the cultural ideal and the lived reality.
Yes, a huge gap.
It makes you wonder what's causing that recalibration. Is it the cost of living, infertility struggles, or just the sheer exhaustion of modern life hitting them after the first kid?
Well, it's likely a combination of all those factors, honestly. Reality rarely survives first contact with our idealized plans.
Too true.
But the core mission of this study wasn't just to see if people hit their goals. It was to compare the overall psychological well-being, life satisfaction, and family satisfaction of those 5 specific groups we just outlined.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. If you're listening to this right now, maybe commuting to work or doing the dishes, I want you to make a prediction. Who is the unhappiest group?
It's a great question to ponder.
Right. We've got the child-free by choice, the involuntarily child-free, the perfect match, the ones with fewer kids than they wanted, and the ones with more. Now, the narrative society feeds us is a story of longing. So logically, the people who want kids but have fewer than they desire should be the most miserable, right?
Yeah.
Like they missed out on a piece of their dream.
It's a very sound, logical assumption. Unfulfilled wishes usually breed dissatisfaction in people.
Right.
But the data paints a wildly counterintuitive picture. The researchers found remarkable stability across almost the entire board.
Wait, what do you mean by stability?
I mean that overall, 4 of the 5 groups showed very similar stable levels of psychological well-being.
Wait, 4 out of 5. So almost everyone is just, fine.
Statistically speaking, yes.
Yeah.
People who are child-free by choice are doing well. Parents with the exact right number are doing well.
Okay.
And this is one that really challenges our assumptions. Parents who have fewer children than they desired are also doing just fine. Yeah, their well-being did not show a massive drop.
That is fascinating. So if your dream is a chaotic house with 4 kids, but you stop at 2, you don't actually walk around with this dark cloud of misery over you.
No, because human beings are incredibly skilled at cognitive reframing.
Right, right.
Once you become a parent, that fundamental identity shift has already occurred. You've stepped into the role you desired.
So the specifics matter less.
Exactly. Having a slightly smaller family size doesn't seem to shatter your overall life satisfaction because you are still experiencing the core elements of parenthood. You just adapt to the reality in front of you.
Okay, so if 4 groups are relatively stable, that leaves one glaring exception.
Yes. There was only one group that showed a strong, substantial decline in psychological well-being across all age groups.
Let me guess.
Parents who had more children than they had desired.
The people who surpass their own internal limit, that is heavy.
It is. When actual fertility exceeds desired fertility, that is where the steep drop in happiness happens.
Let me put a mechanical framework around this because it sounds less about regret and more about capacity overload.
Oh, absolutely.
Imagine taking on a new role at work. You know your own bandwidth and you know you can brilliantly execute 3 major projects at once.
Right, you have a system?
You take them on, you love the work, you feel fulfilled. But suddenly, a corporate restructuring happens, and management forces two extra highly demanding projects right onto your desk.
And you can't say no.
Right, you can't just quit. The sheer stress of the overload begins to drown out the joy of the work itself.
Hmm.
It's not that you suddenly hate the projects individually, but the aggregate weight of them breaks your capacity. The system crashes. You transition from thriving in your role to purely trying to survive the day.
That is a highly accurate way to visualize it. You just exceed the system's capacity.
Yeah.
And the researchers synthesized some very specific theories for why this drop in happiness occurs mechanically, both in the brain and in the home.
What do they find?
They pinpointed two primary drivers: financial constraints and a profound loss of autonomy.
Let's really look at financial constraints because, it's easy to just say kids are expensive and move on. But it's deeper than buying more diapers.
Much deeper. When you are conceptualizing your future and setting your desired number of children, you are running a complex, often subconscious resource calculation.
Right, like mental math.
Exactly. You evaluate your current income, your living space, your career trajectory, and you determine a sustainable number. You say, okay, I can provide a good life with a comfortable buffer for 2 children.
You buy a house with a specific number of bedrooms. You buy a car that fits exactly 2 car seats. You calculate college savings based on 2 tuitions.
Yep.
You essentially build a literal and financial architecture for a specific capacity.
And if you unexpectedly end up with a 3rd or a 4th child, that entire architecture shatters overnight.
Oh, man.
You are now stretching the exact same amount of finite resources over a larger surface area. That comfortable buffer you planned for just disappears.
The stress of that must be immense.
It is. The chronic stress of constantly recalculating, of worrying about providing, it fundamentally alters your nervous system. You are living in a state of financial vigilance, which heavily erodes your psychological well-being.
The blueprint didn't account for the extra weight, and now the foundation is visibly straining. I get that.
Right.
But what about the second driver, loss of autonomy? That feels more existential.
It is deeply existential. Because autonomy isn't just about taking vacations. It's a core biological need for agency.
Like being in control of your own life.
Exactly. It's your ability to govern your own time, your personal goals, your moments of quiet. And every single child requires an immense, non-negotiable investment of time and physical energy.
Your schedule is no longer dictated by your own needs, like ever.
Right. And if you have the number of children you desired, you have willingly made a transaction.
Okay.
You traded a specific amount of your autonomy for the joy of raising them. Your brain anticipated the cost and accepted it.
But if you go over that number...
When you have more children than you wanted, you are forced to surrender a level of personal freedom that you never agreed to give up.
That makes so much sense. It's the difference between donating to a cause and having your bank account garnished.
Oh, wow. Yes.
Right. The money goes to the same place, but the lack of consent changes how you feel about it entirely.
It really does.
And, obviously you love your kids. We need to be clear that this study isn't saying these parents don't love their children.
Oh, not at all. That's a crucial point.
It's saying the sheer logistical and physical demand of the lifestyle required to raise them exceeds the parents' internal capacity. The 10 p.m. quiet time vanishes. The ability to just sit and think disappears.
Which puts the brain into a state of chronic stress. It's a vital distinction. The unhappiness isn't about the children themselves. It's about the severe mismatch between the expected capacity and the lived reality.
Okay, but I have to push back on something here.
Sure.
We established that exceeding your limit causes this drop in well-being. But let's go back to group 2.
The involuntarily child-free.
Right. The people who desperately want kids but cannot have them for whatever reason. You said earlier that their well-being is relatively stable compared to the overloaded parents.
I did.
That honestly sounds impossible to me. Isn't that an inherently painful, devastating mismatch?
It absolutely is, and the panel data actually captures the nuance of that pain beautifully. If we zoom in on the involuntarily child-free group, we see a very distinct age-dependent effect.
Okay.
The stability isn't uniform across their entire lives.
So it shifts as they get older.
Yes. Young people who are involuntarily child-free, let's say volunteers in their 20s or early 30s who want kids but haven't had them yet, they show almost no impairment in their psychological well-being.
Well, sure, because the story isn't over yet, right? The window is still open.
Exactly.
A 28-year-old who wants kids but is currently single might just be focusing on their career. They haven't collided with a permanent reality yet. There's still hope.
Psychology relies heavily on hope. But as the timeline extends, the reality calcifies.
Oh, I see.
The researchers found that older, unfulfilled people who remain childless despite deeply wanting children did eventually show less life satisfaction than the other groups.
That makes sense.
Yeah, once the biological or practical window definitively closes, the psychological toll of that specific mismatch finally registers in the data.
The buffering effect of hope runs out.
Exactly.
Now, let's talk about outside forces, because we've spent this whole time focused on internal desires and personal limits. But nobody raises a family in a vacuum. Did this study look at the outside world's influence on these parents' happiness?
They did. And this is perhaps one of the most jarring revelations in the entire study.
Really?
Yeah. The researchers didn't just ask about feelings. They gathered data on several major external environmental factors.
Like what?
They analyzed the volunteers' religious affiliations. They looked at the prevailing social norms in their specific communities. They even looked at the quality of the childcare infrastructure in their geographical regions.
Whoa, stop. Childcare infrastructure.
Yep.
That is the center of the modern parenting debate. Access to affordable daycare, good school systems, community support. Surely, living in a city with incredible childcare dramatically boosts the happiness of these overloaded parents.
You would think it would be a massive variable, right?
Obviously.
But the data showed that religion, community social norms, and even the quality of local childcare infrastructure had absolutely no substantial effect on altering the core results.
Wait. None.
None.
That feels physically impossible. If you are drowning in too many kids, wouldn't a great affordable daycare down the street act as a life preserver? Like, how can it have no effect?
Because we are dealing with human psychology, not just logistics. If we look at the mechanics of identity, it tells us something profound. You cannot outsource an identity misalignment.
Okay, unpack that for me.
A great daycare center solves a logistical problem for 8 hours a day, but it cannot fix the internal existential stress of living a life that fundamentally contradicts your deeply held personal desires.
So it's like putting a Band-Aid on a broken bone. The Band-Aid is nice, it covers the scratch on the surface, but the underlying structural integrity is still totally compromised.
Right. External environmental factors are just the scaffolding around the building. Your internal compass, your fundamental fertility desires, your vision for your own autonomy, that is the building itself.
I love that analogy.
And if the building is inherently the wrong shape for what you wanted, the quality of the scaffolding doesn't make you feel better about living inside it.
So what does this all mean? I mean, if external fixes don't actually move the needle on our baseline happiness, we are entirely responsible for our own psychological well-being. That is incredibly empowering, but frankly, terrifying.
It demands a high level of self-awareness. It means the only reliable path to life satisfaction is being ruthlessly honest about what we actually want, rather than just accepting what society suggests we should want.
If you are listening to this, right, maybe mapping out your own next 5 or 10 years, the ultimate takeaway from 23,000 Lives is this. There is no universal magic number of children that unlocks a happy life. 0 isn't the magic number, 2 isn't the magic number, 5 isn't the magic number. The key to psychological well-being isn't hitting a cultural milestone. It's avoiding a mismatch.
Perfectly said.
It's ensuring that the reality you are building actually aligns with your internal capacity.
Which raises an essential, lingering question, a provocation to really think about long after this deep dive is over.
Ooh, let's hear it.
If our lifelong happiness relies so heavily on making sure our lives match our desired number of children, how often do we stop to critically examine the origin of that desire?
Oh, that is a fantastic point. Where did the number even come from?
Right. Did you sit down in a vacuum and independently calculate your ideal number? Or was that ideal quietly programmed into your subconscious by the culture you grew up in, the media you consume, or the unspoken expectations of your own parents?
Wow.
If a mismatch between desire and reality causes this much unhappiness, we better be absolutely certain that the desire we are chasing belongs to us in the first place.
You have to interrogate your own goals. Don't dedicate your life to building a massive, chaotic mansion just because society handed you the blueprints for one.
Exactly.
Build the structure you actually want to inhabit, whether that's a quiet cabin for one or a bustling house of 5. Because when the scaffolding comes down, you are the one who has to live inside it every single day.
It's your life.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning your sources, keep examining your own blueprints, and keep seeking out those aha moments. We'll catch you next time.